Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast talks about human development and psychology, kind of try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about stress of modern life on children, and we're going to take back up on that. Because, like I said, it's not easy growing up, and, modern life is especially not friendly to our little people. Children who grow up surrounded by violence often have trouble concentrating and sleeping because they're worried about the violence that they're surrounded by, of course. They may be afraid that their mothers will abandon them. And sometimes that's true, especially if, the family's getting a divorce and the father's already abandoned them. And then they're like, oh no, is mom going to leave me too? Because kids worry about stuff like that, and that's why you need communication. You need to talk to the kid, make sure they understand what's going on and what's not going on. Some become aggressive, and some come to take brutality for granted because it's what they've seen, it's what they've lived, and so that's how they navigate the world, and that's a shame. Many do not allow themselves to become attached to other people for fear of more hurt and loss. And I unfortunately got involved with a person like that. They are not in for relationships. They're not interested. They're afraid, all relationships end. Why should I bother? And of course, that's a terrible way to live. It's a very negative outlook and very selfish. And, you can't do that. If you do that, you're only hurting yourself. You're losing out on a possibly great, love and experience. So, that's a shame that these kids grow up like this. Children with multiple risks, those who live in violent communities, who are poor, who receive inadequate parenting, education, and health care, are the most likely to suffer permanent developmental damage. Okay, so, the kids who aren't getting adequate parenting, education, or health care are most likely to develop permanent damage. And who are these children? The poor. If you think about all these things I just said, lack of parenting, education, and health care, we're talking about the poor. So, they have a lot more chance of turning out to be aggressive, violent people than people who are more affluent. That's just a fact, So these social programs, these social programs that help these people are trying to make our society a little better by keeping these people from becoming a problem. And there are people who don't subscribe to that or believe in that or think it's just a handout or whatever. It's a one avenue to help with a problem that is a problem. And if it wasn't a problem, then people wouldn't feel like it needed to be addressed as a problem. Everyone does not start out on an equal footing. And that's just a fact. Safety may be an even greater concern in some less developed countries because they don't have the policing and the etiquette and manners that we were brought up with. At least some of us were brought up with. Not everyone is properly parented, as we just heard. In a large cross-cultural study, Nigerian and Chinese children and adolescents had more safety-related fears, as well as fears of failure and criticism, than their U.S. and Australian counterparts, perhaps reflecting their culture's emphasis on self-control and conformity with societal norms. In other countries, they want you to be the individual. They praise individuals. But in societies where, you're taught to conform and fit in so you can do well, the fears are greater because excuse me, um, that could be seen as a threat to your status, your place in society, even. Also, Nigerian and Chinese children did not become less fearful with age, as children in Western countries, with their emphasis on individual self-reliance, generally do. So, if the society is more, uh, let's see, is there a nice way to put this? If the society is more about you fitting in, and being apart, then you're going to be more worried about being ostracized in some way and not being a part than somebody in Australia or the United States where they're being an individual, because in these other countries there might be only so many jobs and you need to be looked at as someone who can get along and fit in, and if you're outstanding you might not fit in. So school-based programs designed to prevent violent behavior by promoting social competence have been modestly successful in the United States. And my kids, when they went to school, they had group where they go to the counselors, the class, and they talk about stuff. And I think that's great because we didn't have anything like that. There was bullying going on, and when they first started in my oldest one's time, there was some bullying going on. So I think that's great, that schools have stepped in and started teaching these kids, a little social competence, so that, the world can be a better place. One such program, providing alternative thinking strategies, or PATH as it's known, presumes that thoughts and behavior are based on emotional awareness and control. So, that is something that even adults can learn. Your thoughts are what they are. But where the difference comes in is how you behave after you have a thought. Because as we talked earlier about impulses, you don't necessarily have to act on every thought you have. And sometimes you shouldn't because it might not be good. So, when you have these thoughts, realize that they can just be an emotion. And sometimes our emotions are hard to control. And you need to learn to think before you act because, we're not animals. We have a higher brain and we're supposed to use that higher brain rather than be, reactive and impulsive like an animal is. Emotional and cognitive development are guided through carefully sequenced lessons that include instruction worksheets, discussions, role-playing, and modeling and reinforcement by teachers and peers. And like I said, in my son's school was done by the counselors, and each class had like group time, and they would go and they would do this, and I thought that was great. It's like all schools should do this, and they of course don't, but I think it would help kids tremendously. Experience with such programs suggests the desirability of school reforms aimed at integrating social, emotional, and academic development, since children who are socially competent and have little conflict with classmates may be able to better concentrate on school work. And like I said, it's unfortunate that schools have to teach this. It used to be something you got at home, but as society has changed and the industrialized countries, we need the money. It's hard to have someone at home all the time. They got to work. Therefore, the child's not getting as much input as they should be, probably. So schools are stepping in to give this child some, mental and emotional competence so that they can navigate the world as well-adjusted individuals and do better in school and in life in general. Resilient children are those who weather circumstances that might blight others, who maintain their composure and competence under challenge or threat, or who bounce back from traumatic events. And now I was told by a psychologist that I was resilient, that I was surprisingly well adjusted given all the things that I had lived through. And, that's something that I tried to teach my children. It's like, it's not the end of the world. If this bad thing happened, yes, it happened, it's terrible, cry, get upset, pound your pillow, whatever you need to do, but then you can move on. You don't let that define you. Like I tell some people, I used to tell my coaching clients and students, don't let the bad guys win. If this is your story and you're writing your story, don't let the bad guys win. You get to win, And if you allow the traumatic events and the problems that maybe someone else did to you to run your life, then they're in charge. They won. So, resilience is something that you can teach. Now, emotionally, you might not be as resilient as the next guy. But, like I said, it's something that you can teach. These children do not possess extraordinary qualities, see? They simply manage, despite all adverse circumstances, to hold on to the basic systems and resources that promote positive development in normal children. And like I said, I thank my grandma and one of my great aunts because they were there for me and they talked to me about things. And I know someone who was sexually assaulted when they were a young person, and they said that what their mother said to them was, oh, you're old enough to know by now what women have to put up with. And I think that was terrible, but in a way, she said it kind of helped because she got angry about it. And then, it kind of helped her take her mind off the sadness and depression and, shock because she got angry about it. So even though that was a horrible thing for her mother to say to her, it, in a way, helped her to get through the trauma. We're going to talk about the characteristics of resilient children and adolescents. In an individual, the good intellectual functioning, appealing, sociable, easygoing disposition, self-efficacy, self-confidence, and high self-esteem. And they have talents and faith usually. And like I said, if I hadn't been, helped along with these things, I probably would not be here talking to you right now. Family. The family would have close relationships to caring parent figure, authoritative parenting, warmth, structure, high expectations, socioeconomic advantages, connections to extended supportive family networks. And like I said, that's, important for families. Not all families are lucky enough to have that kind of thing going on. But, if you do, you're blessed. And you should try and provide that for your kids. Extra-familial context. Bonds to pro-social adults outside the family. Connections to pro-social organizations. And amending effective schools. And that's, something like I said, I had some good teachers, some good counselors, a good vice principal that, kind of helped me out and made me realize, okay, so home life ain't that great, and this kid bullied you or whatever, but, you don't have to let that define you. You can move past that and get on with your life. Do what you want to do. Don't let that, sit on you so hard that it keeps you from living your life. And to me that made sense, and so, I'm thankful that these people stepped in. And one of my sons had a male teacher after, our divorce, and there was a coach that stepped in and helped one of my sons to, feel like he had a male role model, because he wasn't getting one at the time from home that was any, use to him. So, I'm thankful for him. I still have his phone number in my book. We never called him. But, it was just nice of him to say, even though you're getting out of our school, if you ever need anything, give me a call. Because that showed me that he cared, in a good way. The two most important protective factors which seem to help children and adolescents overcome stress and contribute to resilience, are good family relationships and cognitive functioning. Like I said, that definitely helped me out. Having a good relationship with my grandmother, and I don't want to toot my horn and say I was smart, but I was. Still, got a little bit of smarts up there. They're falling apart. Evidently, when you hit 50, you just start forgetting crap for no reason. It's like, what? Resilient children are likely to have good relationships and strong bonds with at least one supportive parent. And like I say, mine was a grandma. Or caregiver. If not, the child may be close to at least one other caring, competent adult. Like I said, I got to give my grandma the credit because, she was there for me. When things were going not so good at home, I could get on the phone and call her and talk to her about stuff, and she would talk me through it and help me, put things in perspective, or, even advocate for me, which she did on more than one occasion. Resilient children tend to have high IQs and to be good problem solvers. Their superior information processing skills may help them cope with adversity, protect themselves, regulate their behavior, and learn from experience. They may attract the interest of teachers who can act as guides, confidants, or mentors. And like I said, I had several teachers that, filled that role for me, noticed something in me, a talent, or ability, or just even goodness to other kids, and praised me for it and took me under their wing and showed me how to, do some art and some acting and some singing and stuff like that. It definitely helped me to feel like somebody cared. Other frequently cited protective factors include the child's personality. Resilient children are adaptable, friendly, well-liked, independent, and sensitive to others. They are competent and have high self-esteem. They are creative, resourceful, independent, self-regulated, and self-motivated. And I was certainly all of those. My dad tells the story of when I was 9 that he got the feeling that I decided they weren't good enough parents. They didn't know how to raise me right. So I kind of withdrew and took that on myself and raised myself from that point. And they're not wrong. I became self-regulated, self-motivated because I felt like there was no good input from that, particular group of people. So, I made my own way, Kids do what they need to do. Reduced risk. Children who have been exposed to only one of a number of factors strongly related to psychiatric disorder, such as parental discord, low social status, a disturbed mother, a criminal father, and experience in foster care or an institution, are often better able to overcome stress than children who have been exposed to more than one risk factor. So again, it depends on how much stuff has happened to you. Compensating experiences. A supportive school environment or successful experience in studies, in sports, in music, or with other children or adults can help make up for a destructive home life. In adulthood, a good marriage can compensate for poor relationships earlier in life. But unfortunately, a lot of us repeat patterns that we grew up with until you step in and stop it and say, not anymore. And then, you have to make some decisions for yourself. All this does not mean that bad things which happen in a child's life do not matter, because they certainly do, as we just talked about earlier. Everything affects your child. You learn what you live, and every experience you have affects you in some way. In general, children with unfavorable backgrounds have more problems in adjustment than children with more favorable backgrounds. So if you grew up with problems, you could probably have problems. Some outwardly resilient children may suffer internal distress that may have long-term consequences. And a lot of people who act like they're fine inside can have depression, anxiety, and unless you deal with that, that's going to be a problem throughout your life. Still, what is heartening about these findings is that negative childhood experiences do not necessarily determine the outcome of a person's life, and that many children have the strength to navigate through the most difficult passages. And that's good to know. And that's why if your kid's having some troubles, you should get them some help, because it's hard growing up, and it's even harder if there are problems. You know, you need to give them the best possible outcome for their life. In adolescence, young people's appearance changes as a result of the hormonal events of puberty. They take on the bodies of adults. So, middle childhood, you're going to go from being a child to an adult. That's going to take some time, about 4 years span, and it's not going to be easy on you. Their thinking changes, too. They are better able to think abstractly and hypothetically, whereas, if you remember when we talked about the kids, only what they see and knew about, like, how they roll the ball and now into a snake, and now there's more clay in the snake because it's bigger than the ball. Teenagers can think more abstractly, and they can think about things that aren't black and white and strictly, in their face. They can think about how they like things to be, or how things should be, or things like that. So it's a big change, not only in your body but in your mind. Their feelings change about almost everything. All areas of development converge as adolescents confront their major task, establishing an identity, including a sexual identity, that will carry over to adulthood. So that's your job as a teenager or adolescent, if you want to call it, is to become the adult that you want to be. So, we see how adolescents incorporate their drastically changed appearance, their puzzling physical yearnings, and their new cognitive abilities into their sense of self, because all these things will be incorporated into who you are. We see how the peer group serves as the testing ground for teenagers' ideas about life and about themselves. And that's why your parents tell you, don't hang around with bad people, hang around with good people. Because the good people, are going to be a better testing ground than the bad people, who might be like, yeah, you should do that, let's do this, and do bad things, and you end up in trouble later in life. We look at risks and problems that arise during the teenage years, as well as at characteristic strengths of adolescence, because adolescents do have, strengths that help them get through this rough part of life. And if you think back in time, you can realize it was a rough part of life. What I like in my adolescence is that they have not yet hardened. We all confuse hardening with strength. Strength we must achieve, but not callousness. And that's by Ananias Nin, the Diaries of Ananias Nin. So, the goal is to become, strong. If you remember Mulan, if you watch Mulan, like strong like the willow, like that, instead of hard, and abrasive to other people. There has to be some inner strength so that you don't cave under every little weight that comes your way. But you can't be hard and you want to crush everything that comes your way either, or, that's going to be a problem for your future life. Anne Frank, Diarist of the Holocaust. For her 13th birthday on June 12, 1942, Anne Frank's parents gave her a diary. This small, cloth-covered volume was the first of several notebooks in which Anne recorded her experiences and reflections during the next 2 years. So this is one of the most famous diaries in the world. Little did she dream that her jottings would become one of the most famous published accounts by victims of the Holocaust during World War II. Anne Frank, 1929 to 1945, her parents, Otto and Edith Frank, and her older sister, Margot, were German Jews who fled to Amsterdam after Hitler came to power in 1933, only to see the Netherlands fall into Nazi conquest 7 years later. In deportation to, in the summer of 1942, when the Nazis began rounding up Dutch Jews for deportation to concentration camps, the family went into hiding on the upper floors of the building occupied by Otto Frank's pharmaceutical firm. Behind a door concealed by a movable cupboard, a steep stairway led to the 4 rooms and called the secret annex. For 2 years, they stayed in those confined quarters with a couple named Van Dane, their 15-year-old son Peter, and a middle-aged dentist, Albert Dussel, who shared Anne's room. Then, on August 4, 1944, German and Dutch security police raided the secret annex and sent its occupants to concentration camps where all but Anne's father died. So for 2 years she lived in this confined space, going through puberty, only to, not make it in the end. And that's a shame. But what she wrote carried on throughout history. And most all future generations will either read the books or see the movie about Anne Frank. So she did a good thing for us. Anne's writings, published by Otto Frank after the war, describe the life the fugitives led. During the day, they had to be completely quiet, so as not to alert people in the offices below. They saw no one except a few trusted Christian helpers who risked their lives to bring food, books, newspapers, and essential supplies. To venture outside, which would have been necessary to replace Anne's quickly outgrown clothes or to correct her worsening nearsightedness, was unthinkable, because they knew that they were, Dutch Jews, and they would have been arrested and taken. And, they were trying to save their lives. So the diary reveals the thoughts, feelings, daydreams, and mood swings of a high-spirited, introspective adolescent coming to maturity under traumatic conditions. Anne wrote of her concern about her ugly appearance, of her wish for a real mother who understands me. And I think at some point we all wish for that. And of her adoration for her father. She expressed despair at the adults' constant criticism of her failings and at her parents' apparent favoritism toward her sister. She wrote about her fears, her urge for independence, her hopes for a return to her old life, and her aspirations for a writing career. So even in this condition, up in this attic, she was hoping and planning on what would happen next. So she was clearly resilient, because she was thinking about the future and hopefully, how it was going to roll out for her. As tensions rose in the secret annex, Anne lost her appetite and began taking antidepressant medication. But as time went on, she became less self-pitying and more serious-minded. When she thought back to her previous carefree existence, she felt like a different person from the Anne who lived and had grown wise within these walls. And that's what she said. So, she went from being a more selfish, immature child to a more introspective teenager. And most of us realized then how goofy we were when we were kids. We're like, oh, wow, I can't believe I used to do that or said that or whatever. She was deeply conscious of her sexual awakening. I think what is happening to me is so wonderful, and not only what can be seen on my body, but all that is taking place inside. Each time I have a period, I have the feeling that I have a sweet secret, and I always long for the time that I shall feel that secret within me again. And I never felt that way. I always kind of felt like it was a curse, and I just couldn't wait to be done with it. You know, when I went through menopause, all these women talked about, oh, menopause, oh. I was like, yahoo! You know, done with that. That made me happy. I never did care for that, but clearly Anne did, and I think it's because of the situation she was in that she felt like she was changing and becoming a woman, you know, versus the, you know, selfish child that she maybe used to be. But this gave her hope for the future that, you know, with time things could change and maybe she could have a family of her own. It's a shame it didn't work out for her that way, but you know, it didn't. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. Please like and share so that we can spread this educational program throughout the world. Okay. And if you want to help me out, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon and become a patron. So that's all for now. Until next time.